and Gemma,
Aw.
Jim, Kathy, hi.
Howdy, Fred.
Oh, you're unmuted. Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Yeah.
That's my brother, Paul, in Arizona.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Pleased to meet you.
Hi, Gemma.
I'm Gail. Hi. I'm in the back room.
Fred, John wants to know where the refreshments are.
Here, look in your fridge, John.
That's a family joke, so.
So it's 4:42. I think we can get started. And people can come in as we move along. So hi, everyone. Welcome to 440. This is our Artist Talk. We're featuring today the solo show of Fred Bendheim, Making Space. And also in the project space, the title of the show is Concept, and we have Gail Flanery, Leigh Blanchard, and Richard Barnett. So what we will be doing is asking questions. And if questions come up for you, please either put them in the chat or save it, write it down, save it for after all the questions are done. Then we'll go back through the chat, or you can then unmute and ask questions of the artist yourself. So just to say, this show is up through June 27th. So if you're in Brooklyn at all, or if you're near Brooklyn, please stop by and see it. It's wonderful to see it here in the Artist Talk, and wonderful to hear about what the artists have to say, and a whole other experience to see the work live. So if at all possible, come by the gallery. And without further ado, let's ask Susan to share the screen, and we'll take a look at the artwork.
Okay. Here we go.
Great job.
If you want to say anything along the way.
Yeah, let me talk about the titles.
Okay.
So that one is called Confluence. And just to give you an idea, it's 4 foot wide by 3 foot high, just to give you a size. And you can go to the next. And yeah, that one.
I think I skipped. Sorry. Here we go.
Okay, that's called Sunset, and that's the same size. So it's 4 foot wide. And that one is called The Planets, and that's also 4 foot diameter. And all the work is acrylic on shaped PVC board. PVC is a type of plastic. Plastic board. And that's called Influence. And you can go back. Yeah, that's called Influence. So that's 3 foot tall. And that's called Music of the Spheres. Music of Spheres. And it's the same, yeah, 4 foot wide. Sun Serpents, that's 24 about 24 inches.
Hey, Fred, this is your brother. Since I haven't been in your studio since pre-COVID, how are you applying the acrylic to the PVC surface?
I brush it on.
Oh,
I'll talk about the process in a bit.
okay.
Fred, there were a few at the beginning that I don't know if you were able to share the title. I'm gonna go back because I think there was some, yeah, this one. I don't know if
Oh
you,
yeah, okay, that one, yeah, that's called Tiger Tiger.
love that one.
Tiger Tiger. That's from the William Blake poem, the title.
Ah,
So I'm just gonna move through all of them again.
Yeah, so there's 7 pieces in the show. I think did we do all of them? I think I gave the titles to all of them. Yeah, that's Planets, that's Influence, and Music of Spheres, and that's Sun Serpents.
And now we're gonna move on to, oh, so should I show all the rest of them and then we'll ask, and then you'll ask the questions, Karen? I
Oh
forget
yeah,
our
let's
format.
have a look at the installation shots just to, now that we've seen the pieces, see what it's like to see them in the space and
Right.
and
I'm gonna-
kind of get the idea of scale when we see Fred standing next to his work. And maybe we can move through it a little while I ask the questions.
So that's the front of the gallery, which is in Park Slope, Brooklyn.
So Fred, congratulations on a really beautiful show. This
Yes.
work is vibrant and engaging, as your work always is, but something new is happening here. What would you say sets this work apart from previous work?
Oh, thanks, Karen. Well, it's the same material. Like I said, it's acrylic on shaped boards. But I'd say that the difference is that these are all curve and circles. The shapes are all made from circles, ellipses, spirals, and there's one straight line there in the large tondo, the large circle. It's still part of a spiral shape. Everything else is curves. So that's one thing. And in the past, what I've done is I've done a lot of contrast between the curves and geometric straight lines to kind of give the pieces more tension, sort of like a visual tension between those opposites. Here they're more, the shapes are more similar to each other, which kind of unifies them, I think. And yeah, then the other thing is I've been using this effect of transparency. So like you can, it appears like you can see through everything, like everything is transparent. So you can see the layers underneath the shapes. You can see through all the shapes. So I've done that a lot with these pieces, which I've done in the past, but not so much.
Yeah, it gives them a real buoyancy and liveliness and depth that you can see past the surface.
Yeah, I like that. The transparency when you overlay a color on top of another, produces a third color, which is always interesting to do. But these were actually they're not done with glazes though, which is one way of doing that, getting that transparency. These are all done. So I mix the colors in cups or in separate palettes, and then I mask each shape and then apply them separately. So there's no glazing or overlaying of paint. It's an illusion that there's.
It's an illusion of transparency.
Yeah, illusion of transparency, but there really is no transparency.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I guess the last thing I just to answer your question, I think is because these were all done in the last year during this pandemic, and I think it gave the work an urgency, and mortality was in the air, I certainly thought about my mortality. So I went to my studio every day, and which is my habit, and just worked. And, it was a real blessing to have a place to go and work.
Yeah, they actually feel very optimistic to me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Despite everything, maybe they have some optimism. Sure. Yeah. I don't know. I just, I don't know. Why? But yeah, that's just the way they turned out. Yeah.
Which is really nice to experience at this moment. You know, as we reemerge, just feel this buoyant, optimistic work.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Fred. That leads me to the next question. I'm blown away by the craftsmanship of this work. And like the best craftsmanship, it's so seamless and integral, it becomes part of the content. Can you, you did talk a little bit about the process, but do you consider that that precision part of the content I mean, it's how you create the layering effect.
Yeah, well, I wanted the shapes to be very crisp, so the shapes will take, hard-edged and very definite form. So in order to do that, yeah, there was a lot of craftsmanship involved, a lot of masking, the areas with tape and this film I use, it's called Frisket, to mask everything. And it's very labor-intensive process. So yeah, but it was just in the service of what I was trying to achieve in getting these shapes. I had to do it that way, so I just did it, and I listened to a lot of good music. I was making them, which made it more enjoyable. Otherwise, it's not the most enjoyable painting process. Is masking. It's pretty it's very labor intensive.
It's the labor of love.
Yeah. But anyway, what I thought I'd do, can you see me? Right now I'm just looking at the screen. What I could do, I could show you my studio, and that would explain the process of what I do. I mean, basically.
Yeah, we can unshare the screen for a while.
Okay, yeah, if you want to put it on my studio, then I can show. Yeah, so basically I'll just say that, it's the process is basically drawing and then watercolor. So anyway, so can you see this here? Is that showing the drawing?
No.
Now
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a drawing of one of the pieces. So that's how it starts, and then I'll often do a watercolor version of it.
So when you do the watercolor, is that transparency?
That is transparency.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's fairly quick, and that gives me the effect that I'm trying to get, with the watercolor. And here's another one with a colored pencil drawing.
Wow.
That's the music of spheres. That's like that's sort of a study for that. And this is the watercolor sort of study for that.
Beautiful.
Then these back here are actually prints, digital prints that I do, like overlay to try out ideas, just experimenting with ideas. And then I'll just show you, quickly here. So here's another drawing. I start off with a drawing for this is like the ellipse piece. Influence, and then these are the watercolor versions.
Beautiful.
So I work through them, until I get, and this is fairly, much like pieces.
Beautiful.
So then I have a pretty good idea what I'm going to do. And then I make these cardboard maquettes. Can you see them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So these are cardboard. So I do studies on cardboard. So that's pretty much the process. And then I go. Here's where I make them. Here's my table.
This is a piece in progress.
Yeah, that's a piece in progress. So I work flat. This, and the table is pretty chaotic, but I know where everything is, so it works. And then I'll just show you real quickly. This is the where I cut the forms out. So this is the.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Those are all my tools I use to cut them and shape the piece.
Oh, so what do you use? Is it
I use mostly I use a jigsaw. This saw right here.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's I guess that's the process, and then there's a lot of staring out the window.
That's important. So let me move on to my next question. So another aspect of the work, and I see that this is continuing, is that I find intriguing is that even though the compositions are very complex, they remain very contained. So each piece keeps the viewer involved in that piece itself rather than having conversations with the work around it. This feels like an intentional achievement. Can you speak about this in terms of your approach to composition with these, and is that different than the ways you've worked before?
Yeah, I think again that has to do with the formats, which are circular. So in these circular formats, they tend to, they're sort of self-referential. A circle, you think of like a circle is the basic shape of unity, right? That kind of gathers everything inside of it and makes it unified. And less so than say a rectangle that would, with the corners, and it's more expansive. Well, these are more inward-looking shapes, circles. So I think that's probably what you're talking about, or the feeling you're getting.
Yeah, and I wonder about the content of circles. So if your rectilinear shapes, have certain associations like buildings and things, windows and things that have angles, and circles have different connotation. And that leads me to feel like there's a certain content here. Well, and your titles allude to it too, of like,
like a sort of celestial imagery. That's in, there's certainly they're kind of like sun imagery, or I'd say sun, and in each of them are stars, planets. And, I think what I wanted to get this sort of transparency feeling, and I know that the sky is sort of the perfect subject matter for that. It's like it's ethereal. You can see through it.
And and there's so much light in these, and I feel like that's very new for you. That that the source of light is like from within. It's they're glowing.
Yeah, no,
Again,
they all have that. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But I have
in
done
keeping
that
with that ethereal idea. Really beautiful.
No, thanks. Yeah.
And so that leads me to wonder about your inspiration, both the direct inspiration for each piece, or what inspires you in general.
Well, I think in general, I make art because it makes me feel more alive. I mean, that's sort of the reason I've come up with why I do it. It's exciting because it involves making new things every day, and you never quite know where it's going to go and how it's going to turn out. So that's it keeps my interest. And there's a lot of physical work too, which I like to do that too.
Yeah.
Work with my hands and so in general that way, that's the inspiration of why I make art, and why this imagery. They're I'd say they're internal imagery of say universal imagery, but they're internal. And,
so they're personal and universal simultaneously.
Wow.
Yeah, right. And I actually like all artists, I think it was quite a few years ago. I was going through this period where I was questioning why am I doing this, and why am I making art? And like nobody is seeing the work except my cat and my wife, maybe. And so I think all artists go through these periods where you question what are you doing, and what's it for? And actually, an answer sort of popped into my head, which was interesting. I sort of said, well, at least I'm changing the universe, and that's maybe a huge compensation, but I mean, it's not changing, like the orbits of planets or anything, but what you're really doing, I think, when you're making things or you're creating things, you're sort of changing your perception of the universe.
Mm.
A little bit like meditation, I'd say.
Well, I think
So
it's a
and when-
Buddhist. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I sort of feel like it definitely there's a lot of Buddhism philosophy in there too. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
And-
going to say that there's a Buddhist idea that when a butterfly flaps its wings in Asia, the effect is felt around the world. And we, everything that we do affects everything else, and we can't see how it affects, except if you make it visual. So we are seeing in a way.
Yeah, and I also I've read I'm sort of interested in cosmology too, about how the universe originated. So I've read some of, and it's pretty hard to understand a lot of it, but a lot of it is quantum physics, and the quantum physicists have found out that just by observing an experiment, you change it. So it seems like our observation of things is not separate from the things itself. I mean, this is what they tell us. So that, I think, has something to do with making art too, where you just by observing things, you actually are changing things, and certainly changing your perception. The perception of things.
Yes, fascinating. And so, Fred, what's coming next? I know you sometimes create murals. Could you imagine doing this type of work on a huge scale?
Oh yeah, I'd really like that. Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, I did a proposal for that large Tondo piece, the circle, as a mural for a building in Brooklyn. But yeah, I would. Making murals is it's very it was very challenging, hard work, but I enjoyed the murals I did here.
Well, that would be amazing.
That would be beautiful. Yeah.
I'm putting that intention out in the universe.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Thanks for your
Yeah,
questions. Very
if
good
people
questions.
have more questions, put them in the chat and we'll circle back at the end. So now we're going to look at the work in the project space.
Have to just run through these. Forgive me for.
Oh,
Well, you get
no,
a
it's
second chance
nice to
that
see them one more time.
before. All right, here we go.
Oh,
Gail.
hi.
And Gail's work is going to be shown first. Here we go. I'll go back to the first one.
Okay. So Gail, these beautiful pieces are singing in harmony, both with one another and with the work in the room. How do you make decisions regarding your palette and composition? I feel like that's what harmonizes so beautifully.
Well, usually what happens is I go into my print shop and I will pull out the inks, and I know I'm going to be there for a certain amount of time, and I will mix a palette that will last, that I will be able to use for 2 or 3 days while I'm printing. And then, because this work starts in the print shop and then often comes back to my studio, and I collage and do pastel work on top of it, it's really multimedia. The thing that's consistent is I work on paper. So I'll have a palette, bring it home, and the rest will begin to happen. I was really once again just amazed when I saw we got in and we began to hang the show, and I saw my work next to Leigh's work, and how our palettes, without even really talking I mean, we had talked to each other a bit about our work, but it was just, you kind of gasp and you say, okay, here we go. This was perfect. But yeah, that probably didn't answer, but.
No, that's great. Thank you. And Gail, I always feel like you're a printmaker with the approach of a painter. And you're committed
Yes.
to the press, but
Yeah.
yet each work is original. Can
Yes.
you tell us about your love affair with printmaking?
With printmaking? Well, I started a long time ago. I had been selling pastels, large pastels. This was back in the early 70s. I was selling large pastels at a gallery downtown. And my dealer back then said, oh, I need multiples. And he dragged me to this master printer who had a shop on the Bowery, Kathy Caraccio. And I just fell down the rabbit hole. I fell in love with process. I really loved the process of printing, the mixing the inks, the palette, the pressure of the press. There's a little bit of magic always at the end, because you paint your plate, or you etch it, or however you make your marks on the plate. You ink it, the paper goes down, you crank it through this big press, and there's a little bit of magic at the end when you lift that big blanket and you've got the end of the paper and you start pulling it up, and you don't entirely know what's going to be under there. And it's just, gosh, that was it for me. I was never going to go back after that. Printmaking was, I kind of became a printmaker working with her and with her assistant, Lisa Mackey, brilliant printers. And as time went on, there was so much addition to there are so many things. Part of what I do is I collage also on these prints, but it's a type of collage called chine collé. And it was back in Paris, way back, Picasso and all those cats, when they began to, when they were able to get Asian papers, people began printing with Asian papers on these presses. So you ink it up, you use a kind of rice paste on this paper, on this shape, this Asian paper shape, and you put it down right on top of the ink with the glue up, and you crank it through the press, and it bonds. So you're bonding this paper. These two sheets of paper become one. Ah, that's magic to me. I love it. So.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So yeah, you're painting with printmaking.
Kind of, yeah.
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 It's amazing. Did you want to say anything else? I don't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, not at all. I'm.
I have one more question for you.
Sure.
So this is recent work, correct?
Yes, it is. A lot of what Fred was saying, I completely agree with and had the same experience during this. During this COVID situation. I was so grateful to be able to have my studio and to go in there, and all the chatter and uncertainty in my head stopped. And I was just looking at shape and form. And it was a wonderful blessing to have this, shape, form, and palette. And I did quite a lot of work, and it took on it. I was able to explore and push the window open a little wider and do a little more searching, and in a way it became a tad more abstract.
Yeah. So do you think now that we're emerging from our hibernation that it's going to affect what your work is like?
I hope so. I'm one of these crazy artists that really, I don't want to keep repeating. I want to keep searching and finding a new, I want to be intrigued. I want to experience a little uncertainty. I don't want to keep making the same art over and over again. I want to use what I have, grow what I have, and kind of so it will change. I'm hoping. I mean, it will look like my work, but I don't. So I like the uncertainty a little bit. What's coming up next? Let's see what we have here. So
to be continued.
yes. So to be continued. Exactly.
Well, thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Susan, we're ready to move on. Can you please, Susan, unpin Fred so that we can
I'm so sorry.
see the speaker on the side? Thank you. Sorry about that, Gail.
No worries at all.
But it was nice to focus on your work.
Thank you.
Hold on one moment. Sorry. View. Wait a second. Let's see. Bear with me for one moment. So sorry.
Take your time.
Remove spotlight. There we go.
We're chilling.
Okay. All right. Let's go back. And here we are at Leigh. Okay.
Okay. Okay. And let's take a look at Leigh's pieces.
They're so beautiful.
Okay. So Leigh, these pieces have some connection to your recent work in your solo show, Impressions, and they're also very different. Can you tell us about the process you used for this work?
Yeah, so these pieces were actually made before my last solo show, and two of them are a similar process and one is a completely different one. So the kind of orange and red pieces were made combining just straight normal photography with a lens, as well as making the kind of gray shape that you see there. That was made on a 3D rendering software online. And so I combined the two together to kind of, I was just really interested to see the way that they would mix. I loved the shapes I made and the different things I could make on this rendering software that, like, images I've never seen before. They're a complete creation. It's not making things from the world around me that exists. And then also trying to combine that with the photography that I, was at that time mostly doing abstract photography, and just wanted to see how the shapes would kind of meld together. And then the red and blue piece that was made.
Can you go to the red and blue, Susan?
Sorry.
No problem. At the time I was playing video games a lot, and I realized that in some games there was a point where your character would walk around and I would like to, as I do with art, I think I had the same tendency in these games to kind of be like, what's over there? Like, what am I missing? I didn't always want to do what the goals that were set out for you. So I kind of wander around, and you'd find that elements of the game would kind of break down visually because you weren't really supposed to be over there. And so I began kind of just playing them just to search for these areas where, the edges would kind of collapse onto each other and make interesting abstract shapes.
Wow.
That's
And I
so
found that
interesting.
they, surprisingly, the two very different processes, I thought they worked well together visually, and kind of, I'd never seen them together. And I love combining new works that I haven't seen together. They really seem to bring out something different, as well as, having, Gail and I's pieces next to each other, they really bring out different qualities in each other. Yeah. And it's just, it's a great show.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, Susan, can you go back to that then the next one, that
Yes.
one. So this is fuse 1 or fuse 2, Leigh?
That's number 1.
Okay, so when I see these titles, fuse 1 and fuse 2, I'm thinking of things being fused together and also of like a sizzling burning fuse. Can you tell us your approach to your subject matter and titling? And I also just wanted to mention, I'm pointing to it, no one can see that, but the way the gray and the orange shapes are fused creates kind of a transparency that is a little bit like what Fred's doing with transparency. And I'm just curious about how that works for you, how you created that.
That's
Did
so
I
interesting.
ask you
I
too many
hadn't,
questions in one?
try, try to go
Just
each
say
one,
yes.
but no, that last point was very interesting. I hadn't noticed the there definitely is something happening there with the transparency. I will say I was very impressed, Fred going through his images and having a very great title for each one. I have to admit, I'm not great with titles. I don't really like titles as much. So for me, the titling is, I try to keep it pretty vague because I don't want to, a lot of my work is so abstract that I kind of really like the process of people coming up and seeing different things, seeing different shapes, thinking it's about something else. But the overarching feeling of these two fuse pieces was just the fusion of these two processes, kind of going in thinking it was just going to be an experimentation that wouldn't work, and then coming out with something that I really liked. So, and in terms of subject matter, really everything for me is just so process oriented. It always, it starts and ends with process. So I think I'm just attracted to certain lines, shapes, colors, and if it ends up combining and kind of looking like something, that's kind of fun. But it's not something that I don't go in with a certain subject matter that I need to include or convey at the end of the day. It's all about, I think, the overall shape, color, texture, and things just producing a nice result.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's the heart of a collage artist, but and they're also very painterly in some places, and then there's photography. So this is very different than traditional photography. Can you talk about your inspiration to go in this direction?
Yeah, you know, I will say I'm pretty much like I'm constantly inspired by photography, straight photography, older photography, newer photography. And for me, I feel like I'm so interested in that world and learning everything about it that at some point I kind of want to creep through the edges and push my way through a little bit and find, um, kind of where visually it starts representing maybe another medium itself. I kind of like to find that edge. But I would say my inspiration is very much other photography, the process of making itself. I love old alternative processes of, having just a bunch of chemicals on your paper. And I like everything as complex as, a expensive shoot with all these, lightings and models. Like the whole thing is interesting to me and inspiring to me. But I just, for me, it's pushing kind of to the edges and seeing where it starts to get confusing. And is it photography anymore? That is something I always love to do.
I love that. Thank you. So you're really making your own art form, which is fabulous.
Thank you.
Let's just flip through Leigh's one more time,
Yeah.
and then we'll move to Richard.
Beautiful.
Yeah, sometimes I can even put figures in there in my mind, which is, I love how open-ended it is.
Thank you.
Agreed, yes.
So thanks, Leigh. And unfortunately, Richard couldn't be with us today, but we can look at his work. And also he did send me answers to the questions that I asked of his work. So I can read them while we look at his work. So I think he just has 2 pieces, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we could go back and forth a little bit.
Yeah.
The first question was, Richard, this work is playful and colorful, yet it also has sculptural references. Can you speak about your inspiration when creating this work? And he says, sure. First, I've never seen a difference between having ideas and inspiration. Making work for me now, making drawings and watercolors is a way to develop ideas or inspirations. The choice of words doesn't matter. I have no way to look beyond the veil and see where ideas come from. Trying to do so takes time away from working on pieces. I know of a few good artists, whether they're in visual art, music, writing, dance, etc., who have spent much time in trying to understand the, quote, creative process. I'm so glad to be out of academia, where some people actually spend their time on such garbage. So apparently Richard is not interested in being introspective about where his ideas come from, but just active creating these ideas. So I asked him, I noticed how colorful these are, and asked him what influences your palette. And he says, if you mean by palette, my choice of colors, always combinations of colors. It is using colors that I like together. I taught color theory in many classes at Mount St. Vincent. I like the way it enables you to treat colors in sort of the way a composer might choose keys and notes in music. I love the 2 sets of 24 preludes and fugues by Bach. This is funny that Richard is FaceTiming me at this very moment. How will this work? I don't think it will. I'm sorry, Richard, I can't answer you. That's strange.
You know what? I can text him and tell him to,
Tell him to zoom on.
yeah.
But I'll finish reading this question anyway, and maybe he could answer the last question. It explores all the major and minor keys in Western tuning. Likewise, I love the 24 preludes and fugues by Shostakovich, my favorite composer of the 20th century. Shostakovich wrote a lot of film scores for Soviet cinema. They're great. And he's the only composer I know of who puts a fugue in a film score. So I guess I like to explore some of the possibilities of color in painting and in music. If you mean by palette, the actual paints and papers I use, I can tell you that over the past few years, I don't know what he's saying. He sent me a text. Where was I? I can tell you that over the past few years, I bought just about all the fine watercolors I could find. I was using Winsor & Newton, wonderful colors, but added Schimke, Sennelier, Van Gogh, a bit pricey, but each brand has its own nuances. I mix these paints together. I like using different papers. Likewise, I like good brushes. Susan, is he able to join us, do you think?
I wrote to him, but I haven't heard back, unfortunately.
So I'll go on. So the last question I had for him was, do you think these pieces will end up as studies for sculptural work? And he says they are studies for sculptures, but there's a difference between a study and a plan. Whether any of them will be built in 3 dimensions as they are now, I have no idea. So that's Richard. So maybe he'll be able to join, and we could, if you want to put questions in the chat for Richard too, we could get to his questions as well. So now I'm going to move to the chat. If you I'm going to ask the questions in the chat. So if questions occur to you and you want to put them in the chat, you could, or you can unmute and ask yourself. So Amy Wiles says hi to everyone.
Hi.
And John Eckstein says, toward the end of Fred's presentation, I'd like to show you 4 pieces of Fred's work from when he was a younger artist and have Fred comment on his evolution as the most talented and creative artist, as a most talented and creative artist. Or we could say the most, but that would be hyperbole. So, John, would you like to share your screen? Can he do that, or do you need to make him a host, Susan? John has 4 pieces of
Okay.
Fred's.
Thank you. Is that?
Yeah. I just unmuted myself, and can I take my iPad around and show you the pieces?
Yeah,
You know what, John? I can make you a co-host, and then you can share your screen if you'd like.
Well, these are actually pieces of art that we have. And
Oh,
I would like,
excellent.
yeah.
I'll just
So-
spotlight you.
But
Okay.
Okay.
with
Yeah,
my-
show us,
with
John.
my- Okay, so I'm gonna, let me tell you a little bit about Fred, and I'm about 100 years older than Fred. And we just moved from a house of 45 years to a life care community here in Phoenix. And we're in the process of hanging our art, and we will hang all 4 pieces of Fred that we have, and we hope to acquire more. But I want to show you these 4 pieces because I think you'll really be interested in them. And this,
Wow.
can you see this?
Yeah.
See.
well,
Yeah,
we can see that.
Okay, now Fred was extremely precocious, and he carved this when he was 3 years old.
Oh my
And
God.
I remember when Diane and I, my wife, were in Florence and we saw Michelangelo's David, and those of you who have been there walked through the statues there on the side, on each side. And I always remember reading something that Michelangelo thought that whatever he did was already in the rock, and his job was to remove the extraneous rock. And when I see this beautiful I call it an American eagle. And every time I saw it from the very beginning, I said, that's what Fred did. He removed the extraneous rock. And it's just a beautiful piece. We have it in our main room here.
Really
And,
wonderful. Nice to
yeah.
see it.
And here's
Yeah.
another piece. Now this shows Fred. Let's see. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a beautiful of leaves that Fred put together. And it's so different from the American eagle there, but it's just a beautiful piece with subtle colors. And we just love that. And I'll
Really
let Fred comment. I'll let Fred comment on this, but here's a painting that Fred did in his youth. I don't know how old he was when he did this. I think it was, what was it, Fred? In the 80s or something?
I think I did that in about 1990, I believe, 91.
1990, that's right. Yeah. And you can see the creativity, the butterflies. Speaking of butterflies, that we heard about, when they flap their wings, they move the cosmos and the universe. And it's just a beautiful piece. And now I'm going to take you into my study. And I am a retired physician. I'm a retired physician. And Fred carved this. Can you see that, the caduceus?
You have to go to the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
There it is.
Look at
Oh,
So
that.
yeah.
Fred carved the caduceus, which, as you know, is a snake wound around a stick, and he gave that to me, and it just shows the creativity of Fred. He's by far and away Paul Bendheim's wife, Judith Emile, is a what do you call it? She makes pots, a potter, and she makes beautiful works. She makes beautiful works of everything. But Fred and Judith are far and away the most creative people in our family, and we're just so proud of Fred. And I just can't tell you how I've watched Fred evolve over the years. And you know, some artists always do the same things, but Fred has evolved from you know, the American Eagle when he was 3 years old to what he's doing now. And so anyway, that's what I wanted to say, and that's what I wanted to show you.
John,
Well,
thank you
thanks
so
for-
much for sharing.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks, John. I was actually 2 when I carved that eagle.
Hey, well, Fred, this is your brother, Paul. And since
Yeah, hi,
John showed those 4 beautiful pieces, I'd like to show one piece. Judy and I have a rather extensive collection, I'm proud to say, of Fred's work. And he did a series of paintings in,
Let me spotlight you.
Can
Hold
you,
on.
You better
yeah.
switch to.
You have
my
to,
brother.
yeah, there we go.
Oh, wow.
yeah. So you can, this was done exactly 20 years ago, and you can see some of the roots for his more current work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we have a series, I think, of 8 of these.
Wow.
And I think that they were first exhibited at the Mayo Clinic here way
Oh,
back
wonderful.
20 years ago. So anyway,
Yeah, those
as
have.
John said, we're very proud of our cousin, brother.
Yeah,
nephew.
well, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for the support, guys. Yeah,
Hey, well, Fred,
that
you
piece
heard
that
John.
showed.
Fred, you have to hold John to his words. He says he's going to acquire more.
He did say that. I heard him.
Yeah.
You can be my agent, Paul.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, that piece that you showed, Paul, has a lot to do with what I'm doing now. You can see the circularity and the linearity. Yeah.
And
Thank
well,
you.
well, I got to show one more piece if I could. This predates maybe the eagle. Fred, you'll have to. This is hanging in our living room, and this was done when Fred, I think, was an undergraduate at Pomona College.
Wow.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that one's really
Interesting.
different. Isn't it?
Yeah, it's autobiographical in certain ways. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Okay, well, that's my contribution.
Cool.
Oh, thanks. Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Really nice
So
to
Fred,
see.
so-
Thank you
Yeah,
for
you,
sharing.
you see the painting behind my brother there? That was by my neighbor when I used to live in Greenpoint, Mark Metcalf. That's a painting of New York City there.
Ah,
Oh, I was
Wonderful.
noticing that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Very
Mark,
So Fred,
Mark had an untimely early death from cancer.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
so Fred, could you comment on your evolution? And your work has been so varied, and I know everything changes in the universe and our lives, as does art. But what motivates you to change from one form of art to another? Is it life experiences or something?
No, I think I just I get restless, you know. I want to move on to new territory. I think I sort of feel like I use up certain styles or imagery, and I just want to move on and try new things.
Yeah,
But
Fred.
I mean, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I you know, basically though, the kind of a slow evolution, I think, of, you know, where it's gone from more I used to do a lot of figurative work and
wow, really?
you know, nature-based imagery, you know, landscapes and things, and it's, you know, it's evolved to be more abstract and yeah, but slow. I think it's a pretty slow evolution.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what I was
thanks
going
for
to
showing
say, Fred, is a lot of times people want to know, you know, how is there a thread between representational work and abstract work, which, you know, I do the same thing. I can go back and forth. But it'd be interesting to hear from you what the thread is for you.
Yeah, well, actually, I saw the Alice Neal retrospective at the Met with Sarah. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago? And she has a quote. She's saying, "In every painting has a good abstraction in it." Every figurative painting to be successful has to work on an abstract level. She was talking about, of course, the composition, colors. So I think that's true, and so you're just sort of removing the, maybe the less, maybe, I don't know if it's unnecessary bits, but yeah, when you get to the abstraction, it's more pure, the pure forms.
If I could throw in one comment based on what Fred just said about his evolution, one of my favorite authors is Nikos Kazantzakis. Everyone knows him from Zorba the Greek, but that, in my mind, is one of his relatively minor works. But his autobiographical work, Report to Greco, and his work on his piece on, I guess, religion and evolution called The Saviors of God, he said that each of us as human beings with God are in this constant evolutionary process. And whatever we're doing, we should do it to the fullest and exhaust it, and then move on to the next.
Very beautiful.
Yeah, and I think what Fred said resonates with that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That says it really well. So if we're ready to move on, there's another question here. Tamara Pittman says, why did you paint the pieces flat, lying down, instead of hanging on the wall? That's for Fred.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hi, Tammy. Glad you're here. Well, because I put on the paint in thin layers, multiple layers, and if I did it on the wall, they would drip. So I can't do that. The paint would drip and ruin the effect. So that's the reason.
Good answer.
Well, just
so Fred,
let me elaborate. Also, the other thing, I don't know if I showed this one. I have one piece hanging that's made out of sand. It's a mixture of sand and paint. And being from Arizona, I always liked the idea of the sand, the Navajo sand paintings, which of course are done on a floor. I think Jackson Pollock was influenced by that too. So I like working on the floor. It's flat. It's it's sort of, there's a
that's
more
a nice
of
connection.
of a dance, sort of a dance called, if you work large enough.
Thank you. Paul Gregory asks, what music were you listening to, Fred?
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
Oh, and you
listened-
answered it, but answer for everyone. Can you answer for everyone?
I've been listening to a lot of that, ragas, and some blues music like Muddy Waters and Stevie Ray Vaughan, jazz. Mostly I like music that doesn't that's enjoyable but not distracting. Some music I find very distracting, especially if it comes through the walls from your neighbors.
That's the most distracting.
I asked a question, but I accidentally sent it just to you, Karen.
Do you want to just ask it to the artist? Okay.
Well, what I was saying was I love how all the artists today talked about their processes. And Fred, I just really wanted to thank you for showing us the steps for your process. And I was just wondering, you figure so much out within the sequence of steps in your process. Are there ever any surprises that happen, like when you're within the steps, or do you pretty clearly know exactly what will happen at the end point?
No, there's still a lot of improvisation that happens, even when I think I know what I want to do, and then I'll change my mind. And like what I'm doing now, there's even more of that, because I am using glazes, thin glazes. So and with that, there's a lot of unknowns happening.
Interesting. Oh, so the new work you're using glazes with the acrylic and not the maquettes, the finished
Both.
pieces.
Yeah, on the finished pieces.
Oh,
well.
interesting. So how is that different? Is it coming out different?
Oh yeah, it comes out differently, yeah, because it's hard to predict how the colors are going to look when you overlay them until you actually do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have another question for Fred. Fred, do you name your pieces of art after completion? And does the name come to you in a flash, or do you think about it, contemplate it for a long time before you come up with the names, which are so appropriate in the ones that you showed today?
Yeah, usually after they're finished, I come up with the title. Once in a while, they'll come up after I do a drawing for it. But yeah, it's a different part of your brain. You're not using words when you're doing visual kind of thinking, and then the titles really come after.
And I was just curious, just because each artist that spoke today also really shared something about what their process was. So the same question that I asked Fred, I would love to ask to Leigh and to Gail. Do you have a very specific vision in mind early on, or does a lot of improvisation happen along the way?
For me, there's quite a lot of improvisation along the way, and it keeps me engaged and intrigued with my process.
And Leigh, what about you?
Yeah, I would say that for my processes are mostly always experimentation along the way. The very few times I've had something in mind before, it seems to never be exactly the way. It's all about the journey along the way. And typically I even set out on a certain process and I make some mistake, and then that turns into the new process. So not only does the process not completely what I think it's going to be, but also the end result.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question for any of the artists? Going once, going twice.
Let me I'd just like to thank all of you for joining again, and really nice to see everybody. It's kind of nice way to get together without having to jump on an airplane.
Oh, I want to jump on an airplane.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for coming. The next show in the gallery is a juried show juried by a wonderful artist, Sarah Brook. So I hope you'll check that out, and we'll be having an artist talk for that as well. So stay tuned to your 440 gallery emails. And just remember, this show's up through the 27th, and I hope you can come to see it. And if not, thank you for coming today. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye, everyone.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks, Karen. Bye.
Thanks, Karen. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Congratulations.
Hey.
Hi.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you. You always do such a good job.
Oh, thanks. Did you hear back from Richard? I guess.
No.
I'm not sure.
Maybe it was an accident or something. I don't know.
It was odd that he was texting me right when he should have been on the Zoom. He might as well have come on the Zoom.
I don't know what Well, we tried. So anyway, it went really well.
Yeah, I think it was great.
Yeah.
Okay. Have a
Take
great
care.
one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.